one Jack Smith. Joining me now are two former federal prosecutors, Glenn Kirshner, host of the Justice Matters podcast, and Renato Mariotti, legal affairs columnist for Politico magazine. Thank you both for being here. We'll start with you, Glenn. Just to reiterate the point, one cannot appeal the start date of the trial, right? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but even I knew that. But please explain why.
No, it's not any kind of a final ruling, an appealable ruling. The judge has, I would say, complete discretion, not just broad discretion, but complete discretion in managing her calendar and setting reasonable trial dates, which is precisely what Judge Chutkan did today. And I'll tell you, Joy, I was in the courtroom. The defense counsel, John Lauro, did not do himself any favors. He was a bomb thrower. It sounded like he was making arguments to Donald Trump's base, not to the judge, when the judge implored him, give me a reasonable alternative proposal. He said, and I think I can quote him because I was furiously taking notes. He said, we can't do it in anything less than the time we have proposed. And she had had about enough. And she said, well, then you just bought yourself a March 4, 2024 trial date.
And just to stay with you just for a moment, because, you know, the judge goes on to say that, you know, number one, Trump likely knows most of the witnesses. A lot of them worked for him. The information has been out for 2 years. And she goes on to say the defense has not identified any case in the district where the defendant was given over 2 years between the indictment and trial in which there were no co-defendants and no ongoing pandemic. There is just one defendant, him. So you were in the court, as you said, Glenn. What was the defense's response to that?
Yeah, and she actually called them out and said that the numbers that you gave, for example, a trial took 29.4 months. She said, first of all, that was from the time of indictment until the time of sentencing. These are pandemic era cases when everything was backed up. And she said your arguments are, quote, misleading. I'm sure, people would agree with me that when a judge tells you that you've put something in a legal filing that is, quote, misleading, it's kind of like a dagger to the heart. We don't take it kindly, but that's what she told the defense counsel. And she was right. You know, she called his bluff at every turn, and the prosecutors called the defense counsel's bluff at every turn. My favorite moment was when John Lauro was insisting that he hasn't done anything to prepare the case. He hasn't had time. He hasn't looked at the documents. And the prosecutor stood up and said, well, actually, he gave an interview to the media where he said he has read Mike Pence's book not once, but twice, and is already preparing cross-examination. So it sounds like the defense preparation is well underway.
It sounds like he's got more Rudies. Renato, let's talk about this calendar. Glenn mentioned the calendar. I just want to put it up for everybody, just so that you guys can sort of visualize in your mind what this looks like. On January 15th, the E. Jean Carroll civil defamation suit. Remember that? That's happening in January. Then at the end of January, you've got the federal class action suit. But sandwiched right in between there, right on that first day, is the Iowa caucuses. Then you've got February, where he gets a little time off being in court. Nevada, South Carolina, Michigan. Then March 5th is Super Tuesday. The day before that, the federal election interference trial. 8 days after that is the Georgia primary. And then a bunch of other primaries take place in March. Then April, more primaries. Then May, federal classified documents case. The hush money case is sandwiched in between there in March. You could just go on and on and on. You got more primaries in May. This is a mess, Renato. I can't describe it as anything but that. Can Donald Trump make an argument that having to hop back and forth between these trials and cases in multiple cities and trying to also be at trial, can that be an argument he can use to delay any of this?
Well, he can make the argument that he can only be in one courtroom at a time. I think Judge Chutkan dealt with that. She said that she's been in touch with the judge in Manhattan, and that judge has made it, clear that there can be an adjustment on the calendar. So I would actually expect that Judge Chutkan's case can go first. The D.C. case goes first, then the Manhattan case afterwards. But I will just say, Joy, you are right to describe this as a mess, and it's a mess of Donald Trump's creation. So I think Judge Chutkan made that clear, and ultimately she said he's going to be treated like anybody else in this situation. He's not the only person who's been charged in multiple districts. People like R. Kelly have been charged in multiple districts, and ultimately he went to trial and stood trial in multiple districts, and that's reality of the situation Donald Trump finds himself in.
And by the way, to Glenn's point earlier, and I'll give this to you, Renato, his lawyers aren't helping him because they keep going on TV and saying stupid stuff. Here's Alina Habba doing so on Fox.
If it was a normal person, honestly, Shannon, I could understand the concern. President Trump is not your average person. He's incredibly intelligent, and he knows the ropes. He also knows the facts because he lived them. These are not complicated facts. Look at Fannie. It was a phone call that's been around forever, that he refers to as the perfect phone call. What is he going to have to be prepped for? The truth? You don't have to prep much when you've done nothing wrong.
They're trying to turn him into a rap god, so to use the hip-hop language, he's just going Superman that hoe. He's a Superman. He's super smart. He's super intelligent. He's a genius. Nothing can stop him. So how does that help him if he's trying to say he needs 2 years to prepare to go to trial?
Yeah, look, she did not get the memo. She's obviously not in the rest of the defense team. She's almost sounds like she should be working for the special counsel's office. Look, I think it's fair to say Alina Habba, I'm shocked that she even has a law degree. She doesn't sound like she really knows what she's doing. She's sort of like a less drunk version of Rudy Giuliani, just winging it on the fly on television. Look, she obviously screwed up there. But I think the bigger problem, and Glenn pointed this out a moment ago, is in court, really, Trump's lawyer, I think, decided that Judge Chutkan was not going to rule his way, was not going to give him his 2026 trial date. So he was basically playing for his client there. He was basically trying to win brownie points with Trump instead of advancing his legal arguments. So it's going to be a very, very long, several months for the Trump team in the Judge Chutkan courtroom.
And by the way, she was talking about the Georgia trial. But Renato, you're so funny. She would never get hired by the special counsel. They would look at her resume and be like, girl, please. Let me go back to you just for a second, Clint, because you were in the courtroom. This had to have been maybe the most audacious, I'll use that term to be kind, attempt by the Trump team. They tried to equate him to the Scottsboro Boys. Judge Chutkan. The defense argues that scheduling a too-speedy trial is not to proceed promptly in the calm spirit of regulated justice, but to go forward with the haste of the mob. The landmark decision in Powell, which is also known as the Scottsboro Boys case, the Supreme Court reversed the conditions of several young black men for allegedly raping 2 white women. The case, for any number of reasons, is profoundly different from Powell. Mr. Trump is represented by a team of zealous, experienced attorneys and has the resources necessary to efficiently review the discovery and investigate. And as the government points out, a great deal of discovery providers already been available to the defense or is duplicative. I just want you to ruminate for a moment. The Scottsboro Boys case, I almost think they're trolling us at this point. This is the case that gave rise to the phrase "stay woke." Leadbelly, who was a blues singer at the time, coined the term "stay woke" about the Scottsboro Boys. The fact that his team is now trying to use the Scottsboro Boys case, in which they were the victims of a criminal injustice system for Trump, is so offensive. I don't even have words for it, so I'm hoping that you do, Glenn.
Yeah, I've got a couple of words for it, Joy. I was so offended the minute I read page 1 of Trump's filing when they were asking for that absurd trial date of April 2026, because on page 1, they cite Powell versus Alabama as some kind of a measuring stick against which to judge whether Donald Trump and his battalion of lawyers and his billions of dollars should be made to go to trial within about 6 or 8 months. And as you say, the Powell case involved 9 African-American teenagers, ages 12 to 19, who were accused of sexually assaulting a white woman. They were arrested, arraigned, and forced to go to trial in less than 2 weeks without qualified counsel in a death penalty case. That is the measuring stick against which we are to measure Donald Trump's burden of having a full battalion of lawyers, preparing his case to go to trial 6 or 8 months down the road. Offensive is the nicest word I can come up with. And I'll tell you, I got goosebumps when I heard Judge Chutkan, who I tried murder cases against back in the day when she was a public defender, go to Alabama versus Powell. And I said to myself, thank you, Judge, because that's exactly where you should call the Trump team out.
It is. I mean, I think what y'all have to understand is the reason the right is stealing history and banning history so they can steal it. They are attempting to take what is critical race theory, the idea that the criminal justice system is racialized and weaponized against people of color. They're trying to flip that